Great. I'm so excited to bring back to Direction, Not Perfection, Christa Biegler, award-winning dietitian, root cause nutritionist, and the owner of Less Stressed Life Nutrition. She helps people resolve food sensitivities, inflammation, and eczema without unnecessary restriction, endless supplementation, or costly testing. And this is actually a part two, which is super fun today. Krista and I's first conversation, we dove more into the food sensitivities, why we might feel like we're reacting to everything, or is our skin kind of our body's way of some love notes of, hey, something else might be up. So if you feel like that's interesting to you, that link will be in the show notes. And I will also say, so interesting, go back and listen, even if food sensitivity, if that buzzword to you is like, I've always thought about understanding that more, that was an awesome chat. But today we're going to do a little bit more of a deeper dive into grabbing a dietitian's point of view on hormones. And it's just a very hot button and popular topic right now. So welcome, Krista.
I'm delighted to be here. And I love the name of this podcast, Direction, Not Perfection. And I
Oh,
think you gotta do your best and leave the rest.
I love that. Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, you bet.
Yes, I mean, not to swipe away any of the details, but I think we just dive right in today because I would
Yeah.
love to hear. You have a lot of clients that sit across from you as well. And
Mhm.
I think anybody who works in this women's population, that we get the perimenopause, we get the menopausal women, we get all the symptoms. Like, what do you see coming to you? Why does that become a topic?
I think that it starts with this very popular innocent first question, which is something must be wrong with my hormones. And I've been here too. It's like, oh, weight starts to creep on, et cetera, et cetera. And so
Mhm.
I think part of the conversation is when we need to answer the question of maybe I should test my hormones or should I test my hormones? We have to answer it with what hormones do you want to test? And to me, there is some education here. It's kind of sort of as straightforward as showing up and saying, could you test my hormones? But not really. If you don't understand the overall hierarchy of hormones, then it's going to be a potentially a little bit of a whack-a-mole. And so depending on our age, our place in life, and what all has been going on, there is an overall hierarchy of what we should support. Some of it your provider isn't going to really even cover, specifically some of the stress hormones. I have lots of feelings about how we undervalue this. And I'd like to just say right up front, all of this is a little bit of a skill. We have to learn a lot of skills in life that we don't really know that we needed to care about. And I don't know if we talked much about this in the last episode. Drainage and detoxification is a big skill, and it's going to show up here today if we're talking about sex hormones as well. But even stress hormones underneath everything is kind of like, I think those two buckets, learning how to support the adrenals and thyroid stress hormones is going to help you transition into menopause as painlessly as possible, and then also supporting drainage and detoxification. There is never a time where this topic will go out of style either. And so I got really into this topic by necessity because I trashed my own hormones in my second health crisis. So I feel like relatable stories always help. In
Yes.
2017, 18, I was actually working for a fitness celebrity who was going through this exact transition herself. And because she was like a major fitness celebrity and influencer, and she was gaining weight, not working out hours a day, she was trying to figure that out. And so there was a program that we were helping develop, and it was based around fasting. And so I fast tracked damaging myself with fasting. Now, some people will listen to this and say, I love fasting. I feel like I sometimes get the fasting dropouts or the food restriction or elimination diet dropouts, understandably, because sometimes things work for a while at the beginning. And we're just humans. I always say let's not blame ourselves for being humans, but sometimes we start out with good intentions, and before you know it, you're just having coffee until lunch and you just spiked your cortisol. And so you're actually undernourishing. And I'll never forget this guy I had as a client years ago. And this was around not too off from that time period, 2017, 2018. And I remember he said, "Oh, Krista, I fasted today for lunch." And I was like, that wasn't fasting, that was skipping a meal. There is intentionality to this. And so anytime we're changing our diet, there's intentionality. And I'll just use this generic example. Hopefully, I don't offend anyone gravely here, but I think that this happens with like vegetarianism and veganism as people sometimes start off and they're like, oh, I'm eating these really healthy foods. And before you know it, you're eating buttered noodles at a restaurant. Or, I mean, if you're vegetarian, not vegan,
Right.
because there's just not options. And so life gets busy sometimes. So without intentionality, we underfeed ourselves. And I actually feel like when we look at at the general population, maybe we've got a situation where we were overfed and undernourished. I actually think in the health conscious population, we've got a pretty undernourished population. And this is easy to have happen because stress is kind of the heartbeat of our life. It can be kind of the soundtrack playing in the background. And without awareness of it, we may not see our ups and downs around that. And anytime we're kind of pressing on the gas of stress, pressing on that gas pedal and speeding up, and this is an analogy we can talk about in general, we burn through nutrients. And actually, I'll go into that analogy for a
Yeah,
moment.
do.
So when I think about cortisol, the last year, the internet made cortisol a little more famous. And recently, we've been getting into some sex hormone topics to be a little more famous. So it can be good because it shines a light on something. So I always think I love podcasts because I feel like we always need to break something open a little bit.
Right.
So cortisol is not inherently bad. The internet was like, oh, cortisol face, you're gonna have this round face. Which I have opinions about that actually being sluggish thyroid technically, but whatever. But with cortisol, we need to start to talk about this hormone hierarchy. So I want you to imagine a triangle, and at the bottom of the triangle are the adrenal glands, and then the thyroid, because the thyroid doesn't care if the adrenals don't care. And I don't really care if you had blood work done for your thyroid. Usually things are really sluggish and need a little love and support long before the labs are off. So if your labs aren't off, congratulations. It's going to be easier to correct and improve some symptoms. And then finally on top of that is the sex hormones. And so the adrenals are the most important, and it's pretty clear because cortisol is essential. So that just means if you don't have it, you die. And so even though the internet was kind of vilifying cortisol for cortisol face, it actually has an up and a down throughout the day. So there's a pattern. And so if we aren't having that pattern, we're going to feel like this. This is important when we're talking about testing, because you can go in and ask for a cortisol test, but it's going to be a single point test, which is not technically correct. You might be able to glean a little bit of information if it's just generally low. Because back to the gas pedal example, what happens with cortisol, well, I'll talk about the diurnal, the daily rhythm here in a moment. But what we are often doing is pressing on the gas and raising cortisol, and then we're speeding through life, running from thing to thing to thing. Been there, done. Like it takes a lot of effort for me to remind myself to like feel differently around that. But anyway, press on the gas and we blow through more gas. So this happens in our body as well. We blow through more energy and specifically nutrients. So we dump out specific nutrients. And because nutrients are cofactors for every machine working, and they are essential, specifically minerals, for making every enzyme function happen, then things start to break down on a cellular level, and then the body just can't quite keep up. And so when we're stacking hormones on the top without giving attention to this other system at the foundation, it can look like maybe going on a thyroid medication and feeling worse. It can look like going on a hormone and not feeling good or just actually feeling worse, something like that. And so we'll kind of get to these systems and how everything sort of works together. But
Yes, wait, I'm going to pause you for a second just
please,
so our
please.
listeners can digest because this has been like amazing. And I already feel like people need to rewind and you better be taking notes.
I'm
Or
trying to
else
talk
this is
slow too, because my
no,
fast
it's
talking increases my cortisol.
yes.
We got to talk about that
It's
diurnal rhythm yet.
okay, yes, we're gonna go back to that. The only thing I want to do is give an example of what you're talking about of like pressing the gas and speeding through
Mhm.
because I think I experienced this and it was
All
this
of
whole
us.
idea that I witnessed it with a Garmin watch. It shows you your body battery, it shows you your
Mm.
stress levels, it shows you your sleep, and I think all of those kind of just cycle together.
Mhm.
And it was interesting because I used to be a marathon runner. I love a good 10-mile bike ride. I like to go hard cardio.
Mhm.
But in this season of life, I have really noticed that when I do that to my body, and I function through work all week, and I like it drains my body battery, and I literally cannot recover until I take very purposeful rest days that I never used to
Mhm.
give myself until I had a visual that was like, this isn't working, Lindsay.
Mhm.
You are that you're low every day. You're not recouping. And meanwhile, my husband like is back up to an 80 or 90 in his
Mhm.
battery every day.
Mhm.
I was like, what is happening? So, and
Mhm.
you can tell me if I'm wrong, Krista, but is that an example of the
It's
gas
a
pedal?
100% example that your adrenals need some love. And so some of the symptoms to know if you need to even care about what I'm about to say next would be if you do cardio, you feel pretty exhausted, like you could use a nap on Saturday, which is the example you just gave. Some other
Mhm.
ones that are very typical would be craving more salt. The adrenals love minerals, specifically salt and potassium. I'll talk about potentially why in a moment. Some other ones, and this is when it's gotten more severe. And so please don't ignore this. The person my heart loves or breaks for is this is all high achieving women. And we kind of have a performance mentality. We're usually trying to prove something, whether we say it like that or not. We are maybe Enneagram threes or high achievers or whatnot for a reason. And a lot of business owners are Enneagram threes or eights, both like high achieving management, etc. This is a little more significant. If you feel like lightheaded or dizzy ever from like getting up quickly, jumping up from bed quickly, or sitting to standing really quickly. In general, when stress is increased, you can crave carbs as well because carbs buffer that cortisol. And once cortisol is spiked, it takes about 90 minutes to come back down overall. So this takes me to perhaps how is the natural rhythm of cortisol working? And I may have mentioned this one before, or I started to. What happens in the morning, and this is triggered by full spectrum light. So if you roll over and you look at your phone, it tells your brain it's noon, which kind of sets you up for not a great rhythm. And I think we have to talk about that more because sometimes I think, oh, everyone knows that. And I realize, like, no, not everyone knows that. Yeah, right. And so having a full spectrum light, and like, what if it's dark? I've got this little $20 light on my desk. It's a full spectrum light. So it was really cloudy. You can get full spectrum light through the clouds, by the way, from the sun. The windows do tend to filter it because they have energy efficiency tints on them that you don't know. So you're filtering that full spectrum. But you can just go online and search up a 10,000 lux full spectrum light. And I think that those are kind of necessary to have on the shelf to pull out these few dark months of the year where
That's what I
you're
was going
not
to
going.
ask you. Anybody
Hmm.
who's like SADD for
Hmm.
me, like
Hmm.
should really get and
Well,
benefit from.
and anyone, because sometimes I'll notice like, wow, my energy sucks if the sun hasn't come out for 3 days. Sometimes it's funny how much you have to just learn the same lesson. Because I like to stop and be like, why is my energy low? Oh, well, the sun hasn't shown for 3 days. Oh, of course, my cortisol awakening response isn't being triggered. So what happens is full spectrum light, and you can get it, you can kind of like 2 for 1 with an alarm clock. I have bought a couple, but I didn't love either one of them. So it's time for me to buy a new one probably because it is that season. So your cortisol awakening response, or your CAR, is what it's called. No, no pun here related to the gas pedal. It's just like actually called that. It should spike 30 to 60 minutes after waking, triggered by full spectrum light. If you feel like you need coffee to wake up, you probably have a sucky cortisol awakening response. The fix is literally to park yourself in front of one of these lights. And or go outside and look at the dang sun for 3 minutes. I know it could be cold, but this is a really great hack for your life. I don't remember the stats on sleep issues, but like an obscene amount of people have sleep issues. And maybe if you have sleep issues, you have learned this. The more severe the sleep issues, the more important the circadian rhythm work is technically. So I need to get through this and wrap it with a bow. So it should be triggered 30 to 60 minutes after waking and have that peak right away in the morning. And so if you go in and do a blood draw in the morning and your cortisol is really low, that might be a sign that like, oh, you don't have a good cortisol awakening response. But a proper cortisol test would be 4 points throughout the day. It would see the awakening, the spike, and then the afternoon, and then the evening. So some things that I've seen on these tests is that sometimes you'll have a drop mid-afternoon and you can say to somebody, oh, I bet you feel have a real drop in energy in the afternoon. They're like, how did you know? Like, well, your cortisol is lower than at your bedtime. And then some people are wired and tired. I find that there's similar personality traits going on here. Usually we're doing something that activates us right before bed. Maybe it's paying bills, trying to clean something up, do all the dishes, but it's like it's kind of a stress thing like, oh, I have to have the house look a certain way before bed. But if we're doing it in a way that is triggering stress, and I'm not saying that you couldn't do it, it's just that it's really about awareness of what my nervous system state is around that topic. Because once you trigger the cortisol, it takes 90 minutes to come down. So if your cortisol is spiking right before bed, that's typically wired and tired. So we want the cortisol to actually be the lowest part of the day, right before bed.
So
Sure.
to actually get those different points of
Hmm.
cortisol understanding, like they would be having to go back in for a blood draw at different times of the day
Oh no,
to
you would
see.
take home a 4 point salivary cortisol test. So you just like put it under your, it's like a tampon on your mouth. to get
So
the
interesting.
saliva. I know. You can do it urinary too, and I don't mind urinary. I was using a dried urine test for comprehensive hormones when I did this more often. I then, for years, switched to hair tissue mineral analysis, which didn't look at the 4-point cortisol. It gave in a ratio of the adrenal status overall. In general, I think you can do a lot with symptoms. Lindsay, you could technically, if you're feeling fatigued, after that cardio, there's a good sign that, oh, maybe I should love on my adrenals. People or any of these symptoms I brought up, there's several other ones. Even struggling to go more than a few hours between meals is a really severe one. And that's because these little adrenal glands, they produce a few hormones. So they produce cortisol, but it's essential, right? If you don't have it, you die. But we don't really test or talk about it. And I always say, don't blame your provider. They didn't get educated about this either. And I think
Right.
this is probably one of the most undervalued conversations out there. Like learning this is literally life-changing. Anyway, so produces cortisol, it produces aldosterone that controls your blood pressure. So people with sad adrenal function typically have normal to low blood pressure. That's why they're having that dizziness or whatnot upon standing. These glands also produce aldosterone. Did I already say aldosterone? That's what I just said. They produce
Yeah.
aldosterone that controls the blood pressure. And so for me, that used to look like, oh, public presentations pitting out. That was my aldosterone working
Mhm.
to try to keep my blood pressure normal. And so it was like spilling out salt, sweat, essentially, which is why we crave that salt. And then the other hormone that they produce. And so this is a good screening test. This is actually way better screening as a DHEA. You can actually ask for a DHEA blood test when that is low. So when someone comes into me and they're on DHEA, I know their adrenals are fried because if their adrenals aren't able to produce hormones, if the most essential hormone is cortisol, it's got to produce some of that. But if it is not producing DHEA well, then you know that it's underproducing things. And so like everything above that is going to suck too. Potentially your thyroid,
Yes.
potentially your sex hormones, if we're talking about this hierarchy. So DHEA helps your body manage lipids and blood sugar. And so that's why it's kind of this buffer or this bumpers of like if you didn't eat for a while, it'll kind of recruit sugar into the blood so that way you continue to have energy. So if your DHEA is low and you don't have these little bumpers for if you haven't eaten for a few hours, you're going to be the girl who needs to carry snacks everywhere, typically.
Okay, let's put this pause in again and talk because I want to talk the loving on adrenals and what that actually looks like. But I also
Mhm.
let's go back to when you were like, if you wake up and look at your phone, or if you do kind
Yeah.
of a tired and wired activity before you go to bed,
Hmm.
because
Yeah.
I
Because
know
there's some
everyone.
really simple tricks here, and most of
Yes,
it's like
that's what I'm
free.
like. I
Hmm.
guarantee people can hear you and be like, I'm not doing anything about it. I hear
Yeah,
you.
I'd like to tell you, like, I'm not better than you. I actually just have some tricks, and they're
Okay.
free. So you can Google how to turn my phone screen red to block the blue light. And so someone set this up for me in 2018. It's carried over to every single phone. This is an iPhone, but they do have directions for Android as well. When I triple click the trick button, whatever the one is on the side, it used to be the home button, but whatever the button is on the side, the quick button, when I triple click it, my screen turns red. This is literally dramatically amazing. Next time you're in a dark room looking at this, I turn it on all the time. Like, you don't realize how nice this is for your eyes and how much you were glaring at your phone before, but it
Okay,
blocks
which
that blue
button?
light.
The side, the
So
one,
you have
not the
to set up,
volume.
you have to go set it up first.
Gotcha.
So you have to Google how to do it, and it's an
Okay.
accessibility shortcut, and it's like 4 or 5 steps. And once you set it up once, and if you like when you get a new phone, if they sit on top, when you transfer all the stuff, it'll literally transfer all these like shortcuts and
Yes.
things. Otherwise,
Very cool.
otherwise it just you can look it up and put it on in a minute or two. So I don't know how you do it on the Android one, but yeah, my husband sometimes will like pull his iPad out at night. I'm like, please stop that. I hit
You
the
are
home button.
messing with
I'm like, so what happens
circadian
with,
rhythm.
yes, so when your brain gets this message through the eyes, it's called the suprachiasmatic nucleus in the brain. So when you get this message of full spectrum light from your skin or your eyes, and by the way, full spectrum light isn't out all day, it's like out in the morning. It changes throughout the year. There's apps that will show you, but generally before 9 a.m., it's like pretty solid to have full spectrum light. I don't get too, sometimes I'm like, I don't have to get too wrapped up in this. Just go outside in the
Okay.
morning for a couple minutes
Uh-huh.
and let the sun either behind the clouds, in the clouds, like it hit my eyes. And yes, sometimes it has not risen yet, and that's a little bit trickier, and that's the full spectrum light. So once you get that full spectrum light hitting the eyes and the skin, it's going to tell the brain it's time to wake up. Like it's a morning time now. It's time to trigger this cortisol waking response. and start to make hormones for the day. And so it's also making melatonin for nighttime. And
Hmm.
what happens is blue light throughout the day, and the literature on this is extreme. Like there's plenty of it, fluorescent lights, etc., and lots of blue light at night destroys that melatonin. And so that can be challenging for then going to bed. So that's a little bit about that circadian rhythm of light. And it is really darn important for hormones because it helps trigger, oh, it's time to make our hormones for the day type stuff. And also makes the melatonin for night. And as you turn down the lights at night, or you see the sunset, or you see these red light, back in the day, it was like fires in caveman times. It starts to release that melatonin. So just turning off the lights as you get closer to bedtime or an hour and a half before and set an alarm in your phone to start to remind you to do this can be really supportive and helpful as well. Just like it's a little thing. And the thing is like if we can do little free things, they'll really compound typically. And so it's sort of, it's kind of tricky because we now have like LED lights and I love the brightness of LED lights, but I also hate artificial light. So I try to avoid it as much as possible. But my point is the little like micro flicker that happens with LED lights is really disrupting to our hormone rhythms, et cetera, and circadian rhythms, unfortunately. So
So interesting.
it
Yes. Oh my
is.
gosh, we're going to need a part three because I really want to stick on this loving on our
Adrenals.
adrenals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an
Take as long
important
as you
topic.
need on this because
Yeah. Well, it's
good.
actually fairly simple. So there's lots of ways, but what I wanted to tell you, I think I forgot to mention this before. Let's say you're like, I have some symptoms of maybe some adrenal stuff, and I should probably pull up my whole checklist and we could go through it because I want to make sure people can self-identify because I think this is pretty important to love on. So you have a couple
Yes.
options. You can like sleep all the time, and you can sleep like 7 to 10 hours. So there are some non-negotiables like do weightlifting instead of a bunch of cardio. Make sure you're eating at regular intervals. You've got to be getting enough intake because when you're under eating, this is one of the catalysts of why this can happen. Under eating, overworking, or over exercising, really common reason that the adrenals can take a dump and then essentially like everything else starts to fall eventually. Anyway, so you have some options. You can take extra naps for a year. That is an option. Your body's really good at healing itself. Even red light therapy can regenerate ATP. Even doing breath work can really efficiently help with cellular turnover. So technically, you can heal with these modalities, and that's why sometimes people go on this like big healing year and like they tend to feel better, right? So that's possible. Just nourishing your body. I do use a supplemental approach, and it's three-pronged in order to do this faster. So, a reasonable timeline for actually loving on these adrenals would be about 4 to 6 months. You can usually see a difference in how you feel in 3 weeks. You can go from like feeling like garbage. And this is important because last episode, I'm sure we were talking about the increase of hypersensitivity in the last 5 years. This is an extremely important topic of the last 5 years because when we have these intense inflammatory hits, intense immune system hits, etc., this is also destructive to the cellular function. And so when you destroy cellular function, the adrenals need love. Why do you think they're not producing hormones? Like they're literally like there's cellular damage overall. So we're like
Mhm.
rebuilding cells. And so how do you just generally love on cells or rebuild cells in general? One of the prongs of my three-pronged stool for adrenals is mitochondrial nutrients, which are the fountain of youth. Mitochondrial nutrients. So the difference between a 5-year-old and a 50-year-old is usually mitochondria. And so that's why 5-year-olds run around with endless energy because mitochondria are the little energy powerhouses of the cell. So by supporting your body with synergistic mitochondrial support, you can help your adrenals recover faster. So there's some food-based ways you can do this. The best food-based sources of mitochondrial nutrients are heart and liver. I take this in a capsule, freeze dried, because I'm not real excited about cooking heart and liver all the time. But I have done this for my mom who had an autoimmune condition because anyone with an autoimmune condition should be loving their adrenals, by the way. It's a duh in my life, in my book. My mom had a pretty gnarly autoimmune crisis right at the early start of 2020, and then she wasn't able to eat for a month. So when she came back to eating, I ground up a lot of liver. I put it in a blender with water or a food processor and put it in little muffin liners. I just share this because like sometimes you need someone to say like, "Oh, this is actually possible." Like you don't have to take it
Yeah.
in a capsule. It will be. I will say that the timeline to noticing the difference is usually about 6 weeks with this, by the way, like daily use of organs. But anyway, so I ground up liver and heart and put them in these little muffin tins and froze them as pucks. And so then you could like put them in taco meat or something like that. They can be a little bit strong depending on different things. So to each
So
their own,
interesting.
whatever you're
Yes.
into. They even make like an organ meat seasoning. But that said, I like to be typically pretty efficacious. So, and I like to make sure we're getting things done. So I'm typically going to recommend a supplement of a variety of organs, including adrenal gland. Not everyone is pro adrenal gland. I'm really pro adrenal gland. I have no issues with it whatsoever. About 200 milligrams dosing per day in an organ complex. A lot of organ complexes do not always have adrenal gland, but you can still use heart and liver and support those mitochondrial nutrients. Mitochondrial nutrients, again, are these little powerhouses of the cell that help make energy. So some examples of mitochondrial nutrients, I usually would do a complex personally, include things like CoQ10, NAD plus. There's other nutrients that support mitochondria as well, like B vitamins and whatnot. And L-carnitine is a big one. So I'm typically looking for like certain doses of that, but I'm usually looking for it synergistically. I'm not a huge fan of dosing one nutrient at a time ongoing because typically a lot of nutrients, except mostly the vitamin B's and C's, are going to have some kind of other impact on other nutrients eventually. So I think it's
Mhm.
important to say, like, you don't just go on a supplement and stay on it forever. That's what I would call careless. So, and I don't mean that in some rude way. I mean that because I want it to be a little bit jarring to people because this is an issue I see all the time and I'm trying to help improve it.
Mhm.
It's like you don't really just want to be on a supplement forever. Now, to each their own, you can do whatever you want technically, but if you take CoQ10 ongoing forever, I believe it depletes copper and vitamin B5. I can't remember if
Mhm.
those are the exact ones or not. When I did comprehensive micronutrient testing, I got quite skilled at different nutrient patterns, and I wanted to mention something about you being a marathon runner is athletes always had the trashiest looking micronutrient panels because there's a lot of intentional inflammation there. When you're breaking down building muscle tissue, inflammation happens, and then you use up fatty acids, and then those make up the cell membrane, and then you can't always get nutrients into the cell. I think this is why when people were like, why are athletes dying in COVID? It's like, this is not rocket science. This is because athletes are actually more inflamed and they actually need more anti-inflammatory repletion, which
Yeah.
is omega 3s and fatty acid support. That's my opinion from looking at lots of lab work.
Yeah, that's
It
really interesting.
is fascinating, and I'm thankful to be able to share it because then we can do better. When I can
Right.
share a story, then it's like, oh, shucks. That might explain. And what that might look like is it might look like loose stool trying to take a vitamin or something like
Hmm.
that. I see that with the aging population a lot as well. I had a stern conversation with my mother about this a week or two ago. Like, mother, you're not taking anything synergistic. You do not listen to anything I say. No. Again, I have this rule. I try not to tell people they have problems they don't think they have until they're like, I don't know why this is causing this. I was like, let me tell you why I think it's causing it. Okay. Anyway, the prongs of the adrenals,
Yeah.
we want to cover that. So mitochondrial nutrients are the fountain of youth nutrients, which nice little memory tidbit. Those are one leg of the stool. The other two legs of the stool, and I could have put this one first because I kind of just suggest everyone just start on minerals. Another little leg of the stool is mineral support. And so you heard earlier, like you crave sodium when your adrenals are sad, typically, but you might crave carbs too. In general, sodium, potassium are going to be huge minerals, but just doing a complex of minerals can be really supportive. If you do a complex of minerals, that's always good because you've already heard me say, like, I like synergy. And a bad idea here is going and hyperdosing zinc for a long time. Bad idea.
Mhm.
You're going to deplete copper. So we want to get, I think, largely a lot of sodium, potassium.
Mhm.
I have, I really like effective doses. I think you can indulge a lot in electrolyte products. I think the majority of consumer products, if you're going into your big box store, most of them have very little nutrients. They
Mhm.
have about 200 milligrams or less of like sodium, potassium. I'm looking for like thousands of milligrams per day for people, right?
Mhm.
2, 3, 4,000 of both of those. And that takes a little more effort. And when you hit those numbers, you tend to feel different. And then the third prong of the stool is specific adrenal support. So it's like, what the hell is that, Krista? I prefer to stick to things that sort of work for everybody, but
Mhm.
this is where some nuance can live. So it could be as simple as the adrenal gland. So we talked about mitochondrial nutrients, but it could be as simple as adrenal gland. It could be as simple as a complex of nutrients that love on and support the adrenals in general, B vitamins, etc. you're familiar with adaptogens typically, right? Like ashwagandha and schisandra and things like that. And so those sometimes a specific adrenal support product will have those. I am not a huge fan of ashwagandha. If you overdo ashwagandha, some of us feel a little woozy and weird, like more than 200 milligrams a day. I'm not 1,000% sure why that is. I don't know if anyone knows. Some people speculate like there's quality issues.
Hmm.
I'm not sure. I tried it. I'm one of those people who gets woozy from too much ashwagandha, so I'm more of a fan of like rhodiola, schizandra, but more of a nutrient complex. So there's lots of products out there that have a little bit of herbal adaptogenic properties, but they're a lot more nutrients. Remember that all the operating systems in the body, or AKA the organs, AKA the adrenals, is the current organ we're talking about, stress hormone creation system, they're all extremely nutrient dependent. So you typically need to love on them with nutrients. Remember, because when we were speeding, we were burning through nutrients quickly. And so, another important thing to say here is that you can dump a bunch of nutrients in, but if you don't stop and take inventory of your stress regularly, and it's a process, it's like unwrapping an onion.
Yeah.
It takes some real, sometimes it takes some critical looking at yourself and being like, okay, am I over here kind of dreading going to work tomorrow because it's back to back to back? Or if I'm like nervous, I got to prep for this and this and this. If I'm having those types of feelings or sensations in my body, and I will tell you, I don't know if you think I speak quickly now. This is nothing. This is nothing. I grew up in a fast talking women family, and that rate of speed of conversation really increased my heart rate. And so that was really taxing my adrenals, burning through minerals like crazy. So you can feel a lot better when you hit these right dosages on things, but you got to kind of quit spending all the nutrients as well. So it's a little bit of a tricky thing. You can't just out supplement the lifestyle, is what we like to say. You can feel a lot better, a lot faster. And it's nice to feel capable, but a very common thing that happens with people with adrenal stuff. Sometimes, like, sort of the improper term here is adrenal fatigue. The more proper term is HPA axis dysfunction, hypothalamic pituitary adrenal dysfunction. And by the way, the brain is really communicating with stimulation of all hormone systems. So even if you're talking about sex hormones, it's like the brain's got to stimulate the ovaries to produce those sex hormones. It's going to talk to the adrenal axis to stimulate hormones. A really common thing that people can do sometimes is start to feel better. And then they just kind of slip. Like they felt so crappy, they were doing a little bit less. And then they felt better. So then they like cleaned the house. And then they're like, now I feel like trash again. It's like, that's really common. Like you overdid it when you barely had, like you were just starting to recharge the battery and then you overdid it. And it's a learning process. It's like, no
Yeah.
shame, please. No shame. It's like, of course, that's what you tried to do. Duh. That's your
Yes.
normal, right? You're like, you're always trying to do a lot. You're always trying to do more than humanly possible. Or it's how we are approaching it sometimes, right? It's not always that we can't get things done. It's just like how we generally, and sometimes this takes a really uncomfortably honest look at our lives and
Yeah.
awareness and assessment, unfortunately. And that's kind of
Yeah.
where I got, it's where I got with a lot of clients. It's why I just couldn't keep doing some of the stuff I was doing in functional medicine anymore. I had to bring in some other nervous system modalities because I was like, we can pour this stuff in the top all day long and you can feel better. But on retest, when you look about the same, even though you feel a lot better, then people feel bad. And it's like, well, it's because you haven't actually changed anything in your life. So
Okay,
maybe you
so
need.
just for a little motivation for somebody who is like, again, I can hear you to slow down, and I can even feel my energy get better when I slow down. Is there this kind of promise of when done over enough time for that person who's like, I can't lose a pound because you're kind of in the weight loss community here, that slowing down could equal their weight loss for them, that it's like a reverse of what you think you
Hmm.
need to be doing, and then they
Yeah, I mean,
actually
it
just do
sure
this.
helped me. And I think it's a little bit indirect, right? But there's a lot of reasons to that. But one of the things is when your nervous system is really running, when you're kind of living in a state of reactivity, I don't know about you guys, but like I tended to need to buffer that cortisol more often. So I would tend to overeat because I was shutting down my own intuition around like fullness and hunger cues. When you're overriding your nervous system all the time, it also looks like sometimes overeating, even if you think you're not overeating. Like I'm a dietitian and I could overeat. Like a good example, I don't know if we talked about this, Lindsay. I don't think we did.
Okay, say it again,
Um,
even.
like a big aha moment was like I was saying, "Oh, I don't want to sit in front of the food because I will eat it." That was a nervous system response. It was like numbing, where I was like,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, I'd had already created this sort of neural pathway around this
Hmm.
over time." And so when I would sit in front of stuff like at a holiday or like go by and snacking, that is a nervous system response. And so all of that's going to contribute to weight gain, of course, at a very like basic level. But it's sort
Yeah.
of like it's uncomfortable maybe to peel it back and be like, oh, this is actually my nervous system response, actually. Like
Right.
I'm numbing, I'm buffering, I'm blah, blah, blah. But that's how we tend to use food. And so the rate of how our nervous system is operating, which completely affects the degradation of the cellular function of our adrenals, 100% impacts our weight gain. There's a lot of conversation around like cortisol being off, making us retain weight. And I think if your adrenals aren't working, then your thyroid's not going to work, and that's going to slow the overall metabolic rate. And you're going to feel, I would say people feel puffy, or they
Mhm.
will say, I feel fluffy, but like it's like not weight or something, but it's like you're retaining typically more water when that thyroid doesn't work. And in order to love on that thyroid, you got to go one step deeper and love on the adrenals first. And that's
Adrenals.
where I think that your face is like more moon shaped and whatnot. I can only say this because I've been through all of it as
Right.
well.
No, and I think this is so good. I feel like you probably get again the people who they've tried a lot before they
Mhm.
finally walk through your doors or virtually see you.
Typically.
Yeah, I'm saying this out loud to our listeners because it's a lot to take in. And then I think the part I love about the a lot to take in is that there's still more out there that we can
There's
investigate. And of
never out of
course, we
options.
never out of options. And of course, we need a coach or professional to walk us through that. The listener should not understand everything that's being thrown out today. It's supposed to give you this idea that I have more tools in my tool bag that I never
Mhm.
even knew to reach for. And I just thank you, Krista, because I feel like you're this wealth of information that like I couldn't take enough notes to keep up at the moment. And I like that feeling. I like that there's still this next level of
Mhm.
understanding.
It's
And
exciting to know that we've got options, right? Like you're not
hmm
screwed at all. So when we're talking about HRT or something like that, it's sort of
yeah,
like the cherry on top. Did you address any of this other stuff? And it doesn't matter if
yes.
you're menopausal, doesn't matter if you're perimenopausal. Like it's better to start earlier. And if you
Right,
didn't, well,
right.
whatever. I mean, your adrenals are essential for life, so it's never too late to love them.
Right. So, where can somebody go grab more of Krista as well as meet you if they're like, I need you. You're my next step in my journey.
Yeah, my website is christabigler.com, and I feel like you'll find what you need over there. I've got some nervous system tools that you can download. I've got a really good training on like how I've streamlined a lot of things. I think it's awesome. So definitely check it out. And then if you
Yes.
like nerdy conversations, I have a podcast called The Less Stress Life.
I love it. I love when people go binge on other individuals' podcasts because you're like, we can get so much learning. It's like college to me. I might have said this the last time that you and I were together, but it's like college courses, but exactly what we want to learn about in that
I like
moment.
that
And
analogy. We're all
yeah.
lifelong learners, I
Mhm.
think, is what we tend to have in common. Like
Mhm.
I found that learning for me really like recharges my battery. If I've been like pouring out on people a lot, I have to like
Yes.
go like try to learn something new. It like excites me. It's kind of funny.
I'm with you. I am totally with you.
I wonder how we became like this.
I
I actually
don't
have no
know.
idea. I
I
have
don't
not
know, but I can't get
overanalyzed this particular thing.
enough. I hate to say goodbye. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you so
And
much for having me.
yes, you're welcome back anytime.